Welcome to the 100x Life podcast, where we activate people who desire to live the words of Jesus and experience the abundant life he promises. I'm your host, Rob Dayton, and I hope this podcast inspires you to put in the work of following Jesus.
Now the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free.
Welcome to day 6 of the 62-day challenge, if that's what you're on. If not, we're working today on Mindset Prep F, and that's the 100x Life Gym. Yes, the 100x Life Gym. So you're working the movement of 100x Life, Jesus' process of transformation, and this is all about the gym, getting in the gym. And our verse, which is interesting, it's not actually a word of Jesus. Our verse today comes from his brother James. It's found in James 1, 2 through 4. It's one of my favorite verses in all the Bible. Consider it pure joy, or consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And then he says, let endurance have its perfect result so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Pretty cool. So here's the main theme of this chapter, and really what we want to communicate today is that you cannot change your circumstances, but you do have the power to change how you respond to those circumstances. This is one of the greatest secrets of life, and this is how Jesus' 100x Life transformation process works. He actually helps us transform our minds so that we can view life's trials through a heavenly lens, where we can actually not see them or be frustrated by them or run from them or be in fear over them, but we can actually be empowered and advance and get excited. James is saying, consider it pure joy. We want to talk about that. Why would someone be happy about a trial? So that is the major breakthrough we're looking for, because we need to prepare. If we're going to look at 55 commands of Jesus, his words, we need to have a process to make sure that we transform our minds to actually live his words. And that process is the 100x Life Gym. So how you think about your circumstances is the difference between freedom and bondage, hope and despair, love and fear. You can have either one. Each person on planet Earth has a different experience with circumstances based on their perspective. And if they have the Jesus perspective, then it's freedom, then it's hope, then it's love, versus something really bad. So we want to make sure that we view this process. In Jesus' 100x process, circumstances are the pathway to greater freedom, hope, and love. So we need to think of each trial as a pathway to making us better. Exercising the muscle of faith is required for our growth. So workouts, so when we're doing a workout, they come disguised as unfavorable circumstances. Followers of Jesus, we see the testing of our faith as the next upgrade. So if you actually went through life and saw that when you got to a trial, this could be an upgrade. What if you felt that way? How would that change your life, your perspective? Well, this is the 100x Life Gym. This includes exercising belief in each of Jesus' words. So we want to get this concept so that when we get to Jesus' words, we'll be able to transform our minds more quickly through that process. It's interesting that the 100x Life Gym doesn't just include our body, mind, it also includes our soul and our spirit. It's literally the process of the mind taking authority over the body and soul and giving control of our lives to our spirit. Transformation only exists with the ongoing renewal of our mind. So that is going to be the hinge point for the 100x Life Gym. Well, you might have heard this. I know if you're old enough, back in the 80s, this was the phrase, no pain, no gain. Yeah, if you don't have any pain, you're not going to have any gain. And that was specifically referred to in working out. So for probably a gym, but it applies to all sports, that when we're practicing a sport or when we're getting stronger in the gym, the pain that we have through repetition and the resistance of the weights, it's the pain. And we know if we go through the pain of lifting and struggling and stressing to get one more repetition in, that's when the growth happens. It's so crazy because I'm actually thinking of this when I'm in reps and making sure I have to keep raising the weight or making the reps further. So I make sure that I really work out that muscle to exhaustion, because when you work out to exhaustion, that does the most pain. Well, what's interesting about that is no one leaves the gym after enduring the pain of lifting weights and then calls a doctor. That makes no sense. No, in fact, people can emerge from the gym, and this is my experience, feeling the pain of the workout and actually being pretty excited, actually being joyful. Why? Because now we know that pain is good. That pain is a good pain that's actually going to build strength, that's going to build endurance. And isn't it interesting how James says, let endurance have its perfect result? That's exactly what happens in the gym. We let endurance have its perfect results, which is the strengthening of our muscles. So let's talk about that, because James is suggesting that sounds to me like it's joy in the gym. And I experience this all the time. I go to the gym and then I feel joy because of the pain. It's a good pain. And then I get stronger. But what about joy of the trial? Could we possibly welcome life's negative circumstances in a way that is joyful? Is that possible? Well, James' brother Jesus thought so. He says, consider it pure joy whenever you face trials. Why? And the reason he's saying that is because within each trial is the possibility of transformation. It's an opportunity for gain. No pain, no gain. So if you did not work out, your body would atrophy. But the same is true for your mind, for your soul, and for your spirit. Trials are difficult, but we can find joy in the trial if we see and we change our perspective to see that this is good. That mind exercise where we had to really strain our thinking, that's good. The time where we had to stress in relationships because we had negative things happening, that pain can be good in growing us. And then exercising our spirit, overcoming the negative voices and living as our spirit is from heaven, and how powerful that can be to our lives. But we have to exercise it. We have to go through trials that bring the contradiction or the opposite truth so that we can endure and gain a muscle in each area. So let's talk about these gyms, because there's actually a gym for each of the personal realms. So we already know what the body gym is. You may be more familiar than others with what that looks like in the gym or on the track or distance running, or if you're a soccer player or you're a cyclist, whatever you are, you know what it looks like to endure pain when you're working out. So you've got that one. Let's talk about the mind gym. Well, in the mind gym, we have to, the resistance is taking authority over the body. So here's the struggle or the resistance. The body has desires and the body wants to do stuff. Like, for instance, I want to eat. I want that dessert. I want to take a break. I want to rest. I want to go to sleep. I want to lie. I don't want to face the consequences. I'm going to run. Your body, it has feelings, and feelings are really important. They're great servants. They're just horrible masters. And so the mind gym is when the mind says no to the desires of the body. That's the workout of the mind muscle. And think about it through Jesus and what he's saying to us. He's saying, if you transform your mind, you'll actually be transformed through the renewal of your mind. And you'll see all the words of Jesus require us to adapt a new mindset. And that new mindset typically involves taking authority away from the body. In other words, the body has a desire, you tell it no, and the mind says, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to do this. So like, let's say, delayed gratification. The mind says, the body says, hey, I really want that product. It's going to make me feel good. But we don't have the budget for it right now. And the mind has to exercise control over the body and say, no, we're going to delay gratification on that until we have the money. Or maybe it's eating a snack that you're trying not to eat because it's making you a little bit overweight. Your mind is going to have to take authority over your body for that afternoon snack, that afternoon cookie, or whatever's going on that it wants to eat. Your mind's going to say, no, we're not going to do that. Every single instance where your mind takes authority over the body is the mind gym. So think of that as the workout of the mind. Your mind gets stronger and better at renewing when it goes through the repeated instances of having to tell the body no. What's really interesting about the 62-day challenge is we've actually got that built into the process. So we're not drinking alcohol. We're not eating added sugar. We're making sure we're stuffing ourselves with veggies, 100 ounces of water, and then 2 workouts. There's a lot of room within that for the body to say no. So what's really cool is the 62-day challenge is actually building a mind muscle, because every time the body's going to say, I don't want to do that, or I want alcohol, or I want sugar, you're going to have the opportunity to exercise your mind muscle in the mind gym to take authority away from it and say to the body, no, we're not doing that. Instead of the body leading, the mind is taking authority. Eventually, it's going to give that authority to the spirit to leave from heaven, but let's talk about that when we get to spirit gym. So let's talk about soul gym. And in the soul gym, that is all about relationships. And in relationships, we need to exercise love. God is love, and love is not love unless it is transacted. In other words, it's given. Love has to be given. So in relationships, we're dealing with each other. We're in friendships. We're encountering each other in the supermarket, at church, at work, wherever it is. The encounters must have love. And so this soul gym is working out so that you can love others. So instead of seeing them as a problem or discouraging, to see them as image bearers and to extend the forgiveness that was given to us, to not condemn. All the words of Jesus, you're going to be able to exercise in the soul gym. Because how often does it happen during your week where someone is rude to you, or someone just, maybe they don't give you attention, or they pass you off or ignore you, or they lie to you, or they rip you off, or they disappoint you because a friend said they would come through and they didn't. You are given all these opportunities for soul gym experiences to work out and grow your ability to love. And so many of the words of Jesus are going to be about love. In fact, I believe most of the words of Jesus are the manifestations, the various manifestations of love. So if you get good at living the words of Jesus, you're going to be amazing at love. So you're going to get lots of practice for the soul gym when we go through the words of Jesus. Okay, finally, the spirit gym. So the spirit gym is more about realizing who you are in the heavenlies, who you are in Jesus. The Ephesians 2:6 says, we are seated in heavenly places with Christ. That's present tense. So your spirit is literally in heaven. It's in God. You and God are one, and your spirit is that perfect place. Just some quotes from Scripture. Your spirit has been made perfect. That's Hebrews 10:14. Your spirit is seated in Christ with heavenly places. That's Ephesians 2:6. As I said, we have the mind of Christ. That's 1 Corinthians 2:16. Your spirit has been raised with Christ. That's Colossians 3:1. Your spirit was created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. That's Ephesians 4:24. And then you have received a spirit of adoption that testifies that you are God's son. That's Romans 8:15. And I'd say, ladies, you're as much of a son just like a guy is a bride. So sons have a certain right in that culture. And ladies, that is your right. And then when we ever talk about brides, I'm one of those two. Guys are those two. We're the bride of Christ. So it's okay to be a son in this case. The bottom line is that those phrases embody our identity. That's who we are. We are those things. Our spirit is perfected, and we have the adoption of sons of God. This is how, and if we lived from those truths, our lives would be completely different. So for the spirit in the personal realm, the workout or the spirit gym is actually believing and abiding in those things, in those truths. It's actually living with the mindset of those truths. And let me give you the short of it, because what happens is when our minds take authority over our bodies and our soul and gives that authority over the spirit, then the spirit can lead. And when the spirit leads, good things happen. That's where abundant life ensues. That's where you're more likely to find joy in the trial. That's when you're going to see people as image bearers. That's why it's so important to be in the spirit gym. Just a verse from John 15:6-8. If anyone does not abide in me, this is Jesus talking, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up, and they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. But if you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it shall be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. What is he saying? He's saying, live in my words. If I'm living in you and you live in my words, the abundance happens. The impossible happens. And that the Father is glorified in this. That when we're plugged into Jesus and we're living from Jesus, we will have reproduction. We will reproduce his words, the fruit of his words. So we want to abide in him. And the spirit gym is all about abiding in him, to be constantly recognizing who we are and I think this happens in our imagination. Most of us don't hear the audible voice of God. So it's in our imagination, spending time imagining what the Bible is telling us about who we are, that we're seated in heavenly places right now. What does that look like in your mind? Can you get an imagination for it? What does it look like to be, in your imagination, to be, have a spirit of adoption that testifies that we're a son of God? Well, how about an imagination about abiding in his words and just thinking about that? The more we give space in our brains to thinking about that, the more we will renew our minds so that our spirit can actually lead from that perspective. And we're not always just thrown by any kind of whimsical thought we have. Because 80%, studies show that 80% of everything you say to yourself is negative. And we need to change that so it's less negative and more truth about who you are. Okay, so the 100x life of exercising Jesus' words, we've done the mindset prep so far, first 6 days, just getting your mind ready for what we're going to do. And now we're going to go and look at the 55 words of Jesus. So each day from here on out of the challenge, day 7 through the end, is going to be a word of Jesus. And we need to think about what we just learned in the mindset prep, because we're going to be in the gym. Every time you hear the word, now you're going to have the opportunity to retain it, to resist the trials that come. Maybe consider them pure joy. And then you might need to refocus if you're distracted. You get distracted by the circumstances of life, desires of other things. And then we get to reproduce by being with people and having them experience us actually acting out a word of Jesus that is transformative for them and actually gives them the seed for them to have the opportunity to do it as well. So the book, 100x Life, I hope you have it. If you haven't yet bought it, go to 100xlife.com or Amazon and search 100x Life, no spaces, and buy the book, because you need a rubric as we follow along for you to actually look at each word of Jesus And what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to rate yourself with Jesus's rating. Jesus has a rating scale about how far you've come with each of his words. Are you just receiving it for the first time? Are you receiving it? Now you want to retain it. So you would check the box. Hey, I'm just retaining the word right now. I'm trying to keep it with me. Or maybe you're in a time of testing with that word. After you read it, you're like, man, I'm in a time of testing. You check the box. I'm in a time of testing with that word. Or maybe you've done the word, you performed it, you've actually reproduced it one time, but now you're just distracted and you're not even focused on it. You don't do it. You don't have an opportunity to live that word. So you need to refocus. Or maybe you can check the box, I'm reproducing. I'm actually a slave to righteousness in this word, and people are experiencing love by me acting out his words. Maybe that's you, and you're going to check for that word, reproducing. But each day we're going to check the box. Which one are we rated at? Because we want to grow. We want to measure correctly to know how we're going to move forward to expand. Then I've given you some journal prompts. Those journal prompts are specific for you to hear God's voice. I'm asking you to journal from the Father, journal from Jesus or Holy Spirit. And that's tough. A lot of people have a challenge with that. I just want you to try it. Just try it. Ask a question or read the question and then start writing from one member of the Trinity. And what you're going to find out, here's what you're going to discover. I've seen this in so many people's lives, is that of course not everything is right. Of course you're not hearing perfectly from God as if you've got the pipeline, but so much of it is accurate. So you can go back and read it and your heart will come alive where it's right. You'll know where this is God speaking to you. And why that's so important to you is that's going to train you how to actually hear the voice of God and prepare you to grow and to get in the 100x Life gym, to grow every day and become more and more like him, abiding in him. The other thing I want to say before we get on this journey of 55 commands is I kind of being a little unfair, because what is your iteration of growth? You know, if you're on the 62-day challenge, you're going to get a word a day. Well, in my estimation, that'll be a great teaser, but the temptation will be is if I get to the end, I'm done. And let me tell you, just one word of Jesus took me 3 years to really transform my mind to living. I think forgiveness has taken a long time, many iterations of trials of forgiveness, been in the gym on forgiveness, no condemnation. I think I've been in the gym significant amounts of time to grow in that, to be able to give that away. To not worry. That took a lot of exercise. So each of these words, take up your cross, each of these words, to abide in him, to really follow him and do the work. Maybe that's the one that is really going to grab you and you're going to experience the most gym exercise in. I don't know which one it's going to be for you, but when you get to the end of this process, if you're on the 62-day challenge, you're going to need to go back. You gotta figure out which is the one that, and we'll talk about this at the end, which is the one word that I need the most growth in. Maybe you ask the Father, hey, Papa, which word would you really like me to accelerate and get in the gym on? And then you can focus on that one and train your imagination and get your mind aware with that reticular activator system that God's designed so beautifully in your brain so that you can see the trials. You can see the circumstances that are going to give you the upgrade you want in that word. And then you can get in the gym and hopefully experience a little joy in that pain, because you know that pain, let endurance have its perfect work, is going to lead to your growth, is going to lead to the abundant life, is going to lead you with a beautiful, resounding joy in life as you experience freedom, hope, and love. I hope that is what happens to you. That is my prayer for you. That is why 100x Life exists, is to expose what Jesus' process is and abide in his words and live them out. The world cannot help but be different if they experience you living the words of Jesus, which is experiencing love. So go get them, and I'll be with you along the way. If you believe in the 100x Life movement, please follow and invite a friend by sharing this podcast. The 100x Life movement can also be found on Instagram and Facebook, and also at 100xlife.com. The 100x Life podcast was produced by Jenna D of Jenna D Services with music by Ryan Ellis.
Was lost, but you found me here, and your fire burns inside. It will not disappear, because the Spirit